Yes,
There you go.
There we go.
thank you.
Okay. So, welcome to Your Word is Your Wand. And today we're so excited because I'm here with my business partner, Andrea, and we have invited today Marie Alessi. And Marie, I have had the experience with Marie of just discovering you simply by finding your Facebook group, and then you and I ended up connecting another
Yeah.
time, and now we've kind of connected through business owners. Wee woo wee wee
Yay.
like
Woohoo.
the roller coaster ride of stepping into our, and I'm gonna say stepping into our feeling world, because I know
Mm,
Marie, I know you definitely, you work with people in their feeling world, and that's Andrea and I speak
mm.
so much about the power of our words, and that our words
Mm.
create our reality. And
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the most powerful, like I revisited your TED Talk because it was
Mm,
so powerful about, you were speaking about grief and being a widow, and how the
mm.
world has this image of a
Yeah.
widow, and your request to transform
Mm,
what I heard was what we're speaking into when we're speaking about someone's love loss, or
yeah.
someone who's widowed, and that the
Yeah.
most powerful thing, I just kept hearing you say joy, like love,
Mm,
joy.
yeah.
And because, and what I heard just by listening to you is how much, how that is in fact keeping the memory of the person alive, because that is
Mm.
what the person, because I saw your face light up when you said, I know he intended for us to have
Yeah.
joy. Your face
Hmm.
just lit up when you said that. And I went, that's that's the truth of who your beloved
Yeah.
was when he was on earth, and
Mm.
who he is to you now. And so
Yeah.
in that, will you just kind of share a little bit about, because some people that are watching this may not know who you are, and share kind of how you, what you were speaking about, because it's just a powerful message, and I totally resonate with it.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I really am so happy that we're doing this, and yeah, lovely
Welcome.
to meet you, Andrea. I haven't met you before,
Thank you.
so I'm glad we had a little chat before we went live here. I am Marie Alessi. I am the founder of Loving Life After Loss. It is a movement that I have created after my husband passed very suddenly from a brain aneurysm. And Rob and I were that couple, that everybody's like, oh, you and Rob. And we really saw each other like that as well. We knew that our relationship was very special. And we often talked about, how we could literally count it on one hand, in terms of relationships that we know are so in tune and so connected and so wanting, um, to work in a relationship, to be and live that relationship, not just have that for Facebook. Because let's face it, a lot of people look very, very happy to the outside world, but behind the scenes, it's crumbling. And we were not one of them. It was behind the scenes, like you saw it on screen. And I really took a lot of, I don't even want to say pride in that. It's such a wrong word for that. There was so much love in that. And I was also very lucky that Rob and I had this conversation that a lot of people are dreading. They don't really want to talk about it because it's quite confronting to talk about the what if. Yet I remember one day Rob rang me on the way home from work, and he said, "Babe, I'm going to be like 2 hours late. There was an accident on Heathcote Road." And everybody who lives here in the Illawarra knows that Heathcote Road is like a one-way out. There's just, if there is an accident on that road, it's like a 2-hour detour. It takes forever. And that night, I I sat on a bed with Rob and we had this conversation, because for a lot of people there was this huge inconvenience, 2 hours traffic. But for one family, it meant that her husband never came home. They had a 1-year-old boy. I was a young mom. She lost her husband in a front-on car accident. It was so tragic, and you often don't think about that. It's not a selfish thing. It's just who we are. You're on the way home from work. It's like, oh, it's going to be 2 hours late. Great. Now I've got to. We don't think about what's happening on the other side. And the other thing is that we feel really invincible. We always think it doesn't happen to us. It happens to others. People might be looking at me now going like, oh, how tragic, and then move on with their life and think, it's going to happen to me. And then we got that phone call. But before I get to that, Rob and I sat on the bed that night and we had this conversation. What would happen if something was to happen to either of us? What would you do? What would you do? And those conversations, we had like 2 or 3 of them over the years, or maybe 3 or 4, doesn't matter. But they always ended in, I would want you to create the happiest life possible for you and the boys. That was the key sentence. I want you to have a happy life. Don't you dare sit there and, just stay stuck in a grief. We sort of joked about it, but at the same time, we really meant it, because that's what love is. Love just wants you to be happy. I keep hearing my earring dinging on that thing. I don't want to interfere with that. Let's take them out so you don't hear that knocking the whole time. So I'm glad we had this conversation, because not too long after that, maybe 2-3 years after that, I received that phone call that Rob had passed on a business trip away from us, and I remember going downstairs and telling the boys and sharing the news with them, and how we were just holding each other and crying and screaming and sobbing, and I had this voice of Rob in my head. That was it, I want you to create the happiest life possible for you and the boys. It was just this, I didn't know how to in the moment, as you can imagine, but I knew that that's where I had to go. It became my North Star. That's all I looked at. This is where we are heading. I've got no idea how to get there, but this is where we're heading. So that was pretty much the start of it all. I wrote a book about it, about our story, how we dealt with grief, because it was so vastly different to what everybody else did. The book ranked in the top 100 of Australia on the bestseller list. I was just so impressed. I had no idea, no expectation that this could happen. And that gave me the idea. I thought, there's people who need that message. There's so many people out there who need that. And that got me to start the global movement. That's pretty much it in a nutshell, Little
Yes,
did I
because
know.
let's see. I just remember when I found that my mother
Mm.
had ascended really quickly, and sick on one Friday and then gone the next. And so for
Mm.
me, it was real quick. And I remember finding your
Yeah.
group, and I remember reading on your Facebook group. I just remember feeling that it was so, your approach was so different. It was
Mm.
so, and we hear people a lot of the time say that they're going to have a celebration of life. And then you get
Mm.
there and it sure doesn't feel like they're celebrating.
Yeah.
It feels
Yeah.
very different, and yet well intended, but yet to be able to get there. And what I noticed about yours was how much people would share. They would share their memory of someone,
Mm.
and yet it wasn't I dread this day and blah 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 blah. It wasn't so
Mm.
heavy. Their
Yeah.
shares were they were coming in very differently,
Mm-hmm.
very
Mm.
light, of more of a celebration. It was
Yeah.
less of
Makes me
the,
so
and
happy
I
when you say
remember
that.
I was like, this group is awesome. Like, this is so awesome, because it's true, when someone is no longer on earth with us, we desire
Mm.
to, the only way their memory is going to be kept alive, is for us to continue to speak of them, and for us
Yeah.
to continue to carry on how they would carry on, and acknowledging that that was their intention, joy,
Mm.
happiness,
Yeah.
that you had those discussions and that they're real. And um and that to me is just it's a different experience than what most people actually encounter, because I,
Mm.
even in your TED talk, you said it's almost sometimes like a contest, like who's
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
ascended the earliest, like who
Mm.
ascended, like, oh well,
Yeah. There's such
Rob was
comparison
younger than
battles.
Bill,
Yeah.
so I went,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
was, and yet nobody really wins, and nobody,
Mm,
yet it can take on that form. And
yeah.
I, and when you have someone that, and you have that experience, you do see how everybody reacts so differently, and yet the same.
Yeah.
It's been, and yet the same kind of energy. And like you said, that big thing of no one knows what to say. If you don't say anything, that's not the thing. And if you say
Mm,
everything, well, then, you're bringing up something. And I
yeah.
shared with Andrea is that my experience was that for myself, I learned to just speak from my heart, and I learned to just trust and speak.
Mm.
And
Yeah, that's such a beautiful thing to say. I want to thank you for that because not many people do that. Most people go for the learned phrases, my condolences, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I often think, why? Like, I know it sounds shocking for some, but I have found such a deep, very deeply spiritual realization through the process that this was part of our soul contract. I could not
yes,
say that a few years ago. I could not say that. And now I know for a fact that this was part of our contract. This was part of
yes,
me. I was led to do this. And I know it sounds very woo woo for some people, but I really, truly believe that. So, thinking of it from a human perspective, I totally get it that people constantly fall back into this. I'm so sorry for your loss. I used to say that too at the beginning, and now I don't say it anymore because if I reach out to you, Carrie, and we had never spoken before, and I say to you, I'm so sorry for your loss, and you might be on this spiritual journey where you realize this loss was part of your journey and it had led you to something, and you're so grateful for your mom's passing because she had enabled you to do this. And there's this spiritual understanding of, wow, this is so beautiful. What a gift that is that he had chosen to take on that role. This makes me so sad and so happy at the same time. The human part of me is really sad that he had to saying he chose to take on this role. And the spiritual part of me goes like, oh my God, you are so beautiful. Like there's so much love in choosing this role for me to do what I do now to help thousands of people through their loss. So where is that taking us if I say I'm so sorry for your loss? You're sorry that I'm doing what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? Do you get this? This is
yes,
just so
yes, yes.
we it's not up to us to judge whether this is right or wrong or how you personally deal with that. It's your very personal story. So when people come in and say things like that, or the worst part for me is like, at least he's in a better place. I'm like, according to who?
Mhm.
This is almost insulting. So he was not in a good place with me. Do you know what I mean? It's very bizarre. Not that anybody said that with Rob because he wasn't sick and he wasn't, so it was not a very appropriate choosing, but that sentence is also very often used and I don't like it. Yeah.
Carrie and I believe in that we come into this life that we play, and I believe that we play by agreements. We have a
Mm.
list of things that we are here that we have agreed to
Yeah.
complete, and however we do that is up to us. We get to choose what that looks like, and we
Mm.
can um, play in what happened to us, how that felt. Were we a victim? Were we in trauma? Were we wounded? Or we can
Mm.
choose to find the glory of the reason, whatever that may be. And it's going to be different for everyone. And that's
Yeah.
what we can actually take hold of and do something with. And the movement that you created of loving life after loss is something that is massively supportive to the
Mm.
entirety of our planet, because last time I checked, there's only one way out,
Mm.
and we are all
Yeah.
going to experience loss. We're all going to experience loss at some stage in our life.
Mm.
And whether it's a parent or a beloved
Mm.
or an
Yeah.
animal or the end of a relationship, it's
Mm.
some form of loss.
Mm.
And when we stay in, I'm so sorry.
Mm.
There's no movement, there's no growth,
Yeah,
there's no transformation.
I agree.
And my parents just recently moved into supported living.
Mm.
And so my sisters and I are going through things, and I have this box that is from my grandmother
Mm.
who removed herself from the planet. And I've had this box for just a short period of time, and I opened it the other day and I was reading it, and there's a lot of poetry in there that she had
Mm.
written. And I was hearing how much grief she experienced at the loss of her son.
Mm.
And I spoke to somebody else today. She said, why don't you translate all of that and flip all of that poetry? And I was
Mm.
like, oh. And so there's some my grandmother did, and went as far as she possibly could. This is my new Zoom upgrade.
Mhm. Looks amazing. You turn into cartoon world. That's
Yes,
okay.
I'm still
See, we're
here.
talking about different realms here. You know, there's
Yes,
cartoon
we're
world,
playing
there's spiritual
all the
world. It's
fields.
fine.
Playing in all the fields. So I get to pick up and do for my mother and my grandmother what they had yet to be able to do for themselves, which is
Yeah.
on the other side of grief is
Hmm.
massive joy.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of the
I love
size
it.
and the amount of grief that my family has played in, and the anger and the resentment it has created, that
Mm.
I now have the opportunity to play with in a completely different way.
I love this so, so much that you shared
So
this. I can't
excited.
thank you enough for sharing this because it just took me back a couple of years. It was probably maybe half a year into me having opened the movement. And I came across a piece that somebody shared with me about widowhood. And I could find, I could find myself sitting there reading through this piece, and I had my Loving Life After Loss filter on. Every sentence I saw opportunity in translating it. So I love that you said, taking her poetry and translating it and how much opportunity there is. And this is the one thing that when we are sitting in pain, in the hurt, in the grief, in the sorrow, it is really sometimes very tricky and challenging for us to see opportunity. So when we are in a movement where everybody else sees it, we start seeing it too. It's like whatever surrounding influences, environment we create, choose for ourselves, or we find ourselves in. Um, there is a time where it comes a checking point. Do they leave me feeling flat, feeling heavy, feeling sad, or do they leave me inspired and uplifted? And it doesn't mean that we do it in a heartbeat and we learn the same thing, but eventually when we surround ourselves with people who are focusing on healing, on happiness, on joy, we start seeing these opportunities too. We start seeing possibility. And I love that because I took that whole piece, I honored the author who wrote it and rewrote it into, I can't remember what her title is. Oh, yeah, Widowhood is Reinvention. Because she went, widowhood is something, and there was something sad. And I wrote it into opportunity. Widowhood is reinvention. And I took every single sentence from her, but changed the ending from sadness into possibility, into opportunity. And I'm going to be super honest here. I was shaking when I posted it because I thought people are gonna slaughter me. Like they're just gonna go like, "Are you nuts? This is way too happy. This is way too positive." And they already knew me as the positive person as the founder of the movement. But that was really another level that I've taken this piece to, and I've taken a very well-known author and took her piece and rewrote it. And I was like, not sure how that's gonna go down. The responses were overwhelming. Like seriously, there was so much love, so much thank you, gratitude, everything. It was pouring in like that. There was just incredible engagement on this post, and all of it was positive. All of it was full of gratitude, and I needed to hear this. And thank you so much, and thank you for letting me see this. And so I took this piece and I went nuts with it. I shared it on my newsletter, shared it on LinkedIn, I shared it on my Facebook page, I shared it everywhere. And I thought, oh, wow, same moment, like with my book, people need happiness, people need joy. people need hope and healing and all these beautiful words, you know. So I'm so
People are
grateful you shared
asking for
this.
they're asking for something different. They're asking
Yes.
for something different. They've been
Yeah.
doing they some people we're yet to know what it is, but they just know that I mean oh my gosh, I mean, what was it? The 9-step process of grief. What is it? Well, I remember people used to send me all this. Oh, next you'll be in this, and then you'll be in that, and then you'll be in and I remember thinking, no, that's not it. Like I
Yeah.
didn't know what it was, but I knew I was like, all of these things that we've had for so long and we've believed in for
Mm.
so long, there's a desire to do it different. It's
Yeah.
just some people are
Yeah.
yet to know what it was. So the second that somebody speaks into something beautiful, like joy's
Mm.
available and accessible to us, yeah, imagine that did get some excitement moving. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know for me,
Yeah.
I was I heard so many of those sayings and everything and people not knowing what to say and the emails and all the different things. And I
Mm.
I was really desiring for something different and I didn't know what any of it would look like. But
Yeah.
I now know that I firmly believe in a contract, as you said, and that everything that we always say everything happens for a reason, but we don't
Mm.
want to do that on the death thing. We can do it on everything else,
Yeah.
but like
Well, the thing
let's
is,
not
no,
touch
no, no.
that one.
Let me just say something about this because I think you've just touched on a really, really important point here, Kerry. So I'm really grateful you brought this up because yes, I totally agree. You know, when people are really overwhelmed with this. Like I've got so many people reach out to me in the group saying, you know, I just can't get over these people going like, oh, everything happens for a reason. You know, things like that. And also, oh, just be grateful for what you have. I'm actually doing a talk on that on Monday coming up. And this whole happens for a reason and gratitude, this can feel like a slap in the face when you're in the space of grief. This is not helpful. And for me, what I want to say to anyone listening to this is that I often talk about the hidden gifts and adversity. If
Mhm.
you, Carrie, find that this happened for a reason and you can find that reason, this is a huge gift for you to discover. If I have this beautiful spiritual epiphany that this happened for a reason, this is my gift to discover. If anybody else comes up to you and tells you that, I'm gonna really dumb this down. Not to be insulting to anybody of the listeners, but I want it to be so super simple to understand. It is like walking up to a 3-year-old, grabbing their Christmas gift from under the tree and unwrapping it in front of them and go like, oh, look what you've got. Do you think the child is happy when she or he watches you unwrap their gift? No. They're going to go like, you just completely ruined it for me. This was my surprise, you know? And that's exactly how simple it is. These are hidden gifts for you to discover. If you at some stage get to the point where you go like, wow, I can see now why this was happening right now, right here, in that particular way. What I've learned from it, the gifts that I have received through that. This is such a sacred experience. And if you walk up to somebody and tell them that, first of all, there's no meaning behind it for your sake. And even if there is, it's not your gift to unwrap. So don't ever say that to anyone. You know, that's just, anyway, I'm grateful you brought it up because I think that was a really important point.
When we arrive at what
Yeah.
that gift is,
Yeah.
that when we come to that awareness that there is something behind all of this.
Yeah.
Carrie and I love Gabby Bernstein, and she says a miracle, the holy instant when we can put down an ancient hatred or a grief and choose something completely new and different. And that's where we begin to have that epiphany, which is a word we're familiar with. An epiphany is one of the original words for miracle,
Mm.
a great awakening, a
I
great
love it.
knowing, where we get to see and be with something in a completely new and different way. It's changing the lens of the experience.
Exactly.
Nothing's any different. The
Mm.
same things happened, and I my loss is different than what the two of you have experienced. And but I've had the epiphany of where, this is why. This is why I called on this experience, and it took me a really long time it took me a really long time, like decades, to see it. And once I did, it completely shifted how I felt about everything. And then it's where I began to be able to be with everything else that was coming up for me. Why would I have all this guilt and shame? So that I could be with other women who knew the same thing.
Yeah.
And now that I've done that, what's coming? More experience, more security. And so we do it in our own time and to the degree that we are capable of, moment to moment. And I'm aware that there is a belief when we are in it, that it will never end. That grief is ours for infinity, and grief will move through our body. We will experience joy again when we beat what comes up, whenever it comes in. We love what we feel. We give ourselves permission to be okay with where we are, gentle and tender. It will move. And
Well, if we allow it, really, because there are unfortunately people who choose to stay stuck in that grief,
like,
who
no,
choose
I
to
can't
grieve
handle it.
forever. And because they feel, and this is also a myth, like that the more I grieve, the more I show the world how much I loved Rob.
Yeah,
For me, it's a complete
honoring
polar opposite. The more I create happiness for me and the boys, the more I show Rob how important he was for me in my life too. Not that I need to do that to prove that to him, but this is what we decided. This is what we chose. And if I was to stay stuck in grief, in sorrow, in a pain, then what would happen is I would reduce his entire super joyful life to the second of his passing. I would completely reduce it. And everything that Rob was before his passing, the joy, the loving life, the always putting his family first, putting me on a pedestal, everything that we had together, the huge amount of love that we had would be nulled. It would just be, oh no, now it's sad, done. And I'm like, why? There was so much more of Rob. There was 45 years of happiness and laughter and joy and love. So why would I reduce that to his passing and stay stuck in this 1 second of his entire life? And I'm like, no, for me, that 1 second was his transitioning to his next level. That's all there is. And yes, of course, there was sadness. Of course, there was falling apart and not knowing how to deal with that at first, because that's a human side in us. If we were so spiritual, aware and advanced, we wouldn't be here anymore. There's still learning for us to do. We do advance, we do learn, and that's incredible. And I'm these days, I never in my life thought I would get to this level, seriously. And I'm not saying level as in, oh, look how far I've come. I've got a far way to go, trust me. But where I'm at now, and I never thought I would get to this, is that I embrace when negative emotions come. When there's anger, I'm like, oh, cool, let's look what's underneath that, because I know you're just that cover up emotion for whatever there really is. There's either sadness or grief or frustration or abandonment, whatever there is underneath. That's what I want to look at. So I meet it with curiosity now, and not allowing it to take over and just come out in rage or whatever. I don't do that anymore. Like, it's so rare. And when it does happen, and then I just embrace it. I'm like, oh, that was interesting. That really triggered me. Where did that come from? So there's curiosity. There's wanting to learn about my triggers. And I just see them as signposts these days, as in, oh, there's something that still needs a little bit of healing, a little bit of love. Can we just sprinkle some there? I'm like, okay, let's do it. Come here. So yeah, it's a very different approach these days to what I used to do with these emotions like 10 years ago,
Yes, I've had the same experience where we can just look at everything so differently.
Yeah.
But I believe the being able to reshape how we react to situations And we are reacting based off of what we've known so far.
Yeah.
But I do know that the moment that we choose something different, we can change everything before us and after us. And
Yeah.
so we have the ability of shifting all of that, those beliefs, and especially the ones around grief where you stay in and you,
Absolutely.
yes, and how we get to one bit of joy at a time, remembering one piece of joy at a time. And one of the things that you said in your TED Talk that I thought was so, you said, I sat there and I said, what was it that Rob was to us? And he was my knight in shining armor. He made me feel safe. And
Yeah.
you said, so I knew right then it was time for me to discover what safe was going to look like in my house now. And
Yeah.
how was I
Yeah.
going to create it?
Yeah.
And I heard that it was such an empowering, and we use the word secure. I love the word secure, but being able to be aware that you had that power in you. It wasn't that he carried the power. He showed up that
Yeah.
way and you saw it that way, but you knew that you had it in you. And so now it was just a call to time for you to bring it forward. And I heard you said, I took my bed and I just pushed it into the corner because it felt real secure. And there I was.
Yeah.
And that's your loving action. And that's what we call our loving action. It's just, we just do one thing. It's like, we don't have to walk around and throw daisies in the air and act something that's not us. We find what it is and find where we already possess that inside of us. He may have shown up in that form so that he maybe took you to another level of understanding of security, but you have it now. It was yours. And now you could create it in just that small thing of your bed in the corner, which to some people may sound small, but for somebody who's walked in the stages and walked in grief, that's a big thing.
I needed that
Able to
corner to
just,
cradle in. Yeah. I really needed that. It was this, retreating, licking my wounds, hiding away, hibernating emotionally. I just really, I think that's such a natural process. Like even, any animal, like an echidna, whatever, like the most vulnerable part, like just cover up, fetal position, not even so much as in just laying there sobbing. Some nights I would have too, but it was just this needing to feel protected. And what you said before, I just want to really highlight that because I think for me, like having a different perspective, that is the base to all healing. When we start to look at things from a different perspective, and that is just the most beautiful part. I just wanted to highlight that. I really love that. And I don't even think I was so consciously aware of that. What you just said, you knew you had it in me. I had it in me. I'm not really so sure how consciously I knew that. I just knew that I had to show up as that now for the boys because they were only 8 and 10. I was such a scaredy cat. I wouldn't go out in the dark on my own. I would not dare. We've got like a really beautiful old train station tunnel opposite from where we live, and people would go in there and look at glowworms and stuff. I've made it into that tunnel once after I ran out of excuses after years, and I had Rob on my hand, and we had the headlamps on because it gets pitch black in there. It gets really dark, and I remember having Rob on my hand thinking, okay, with him I can do that. But my heart was pounding, my fingers were sweating. And then one drip, because there's water, obviously, on my shoulder. And I screamed. I got so scared. I was like, I was a scaredy cat in the dark. And it's so much better now. I still don't love it, but it's so much better because what you said, Carrie, you show up as that. And I chose to show up as that for my boys, to first protect them and also to teach them how you live your life. You can live your life from the space of fear, or you can live your life from the space of trust and love. And that is my absolute preferred choice. It's not so comfortable to live your life in fear. And when you do, then it's time to just wrap them in love and just look at them and see where the fear is coming from. Yeah.
So many of us have lived our lives without realizing how courageous we actually are.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
That's we're here to claim that for ourselves. And because we're the ones who've yet to see it, other people see how courageous we are and the things that we do and the things we face, even when we feel afraid. And then what I get is your journey was for you to remember how secure and strong you actually are, so that you can show up for your boys. And then in doing that for yourself, you created this movement that supported so many people in remembering how to love life and celebrate rather than to celebrate life. I'm aware that in the past, and I still find myself reacting like I'm supposed to. How do you feel? Oh, I'm sad. Is that true? No.
Is it true? It's one of my favorite questions.
That's
is
what
it true?
I ask myself all the time. Is that true? Yes or no? What's your great self say? And waking up in the middle of the night and going, I'm so pissed. I'm like, is that true, Andrea? No. And so we have the ability, to do and really be with what's going on. That something triggered me, woke me up. And what you've done is, from what your experience is, you embraced what I see is you embraced it fully. You had a choice, and you literally gave it to yourself, moment to moment, step by step. And one of the questions that I had for you almost from the get-go is when I heard you speaking into your relationship with your beloved. I'm aware that we repeat patterns, and people teach us how to be in partnership and love. And so, who taught you how to love courageously?
I instantly thought of my dad. My dad was really, first of all, my parents were married till death did them part. That whole, they were married for 22 and a half years. My dad passed from cancer when I was 20. So he died quite young too. He was 46. And with unconditional love, I still think of my dad, really. And I know that this unconditional love is well overused because it doesn't really exist in the human world. We can feel that we are really close to it, but it doesn't really exist in the human world. But this is as close as it gets for me. Like, I learned so much from him about not judging people. But I just put a post about that up last night. I posted about, let's meet the world with curiosity rather than judgment. It would be such a better place, when we look at people. And it's so easy for us to go like, oh, look how grumpy she sits around or whatever, and then when you actually take the time to ask questions and see why she's so grumpy, then you might find a really, truly heartfelt, touching story. And we don't do that enough. We are in such a scroll world that we often don't stop to check in with other people. And when my dad passed, it was so unexpected. Even though he had cancer, I didn't realize he was passing. The phone call really, it was so unexpected, because for him it was a month from discovering that the cancer had come back, and then it took him within a month. So he came back really aggressive. And I just felt that my gift in this adversity with my dad was that I never left anything unsaid after that. I just really learned to tell people what they mean to me, or to tell a stranger on the street, going like, I really love your dress, or, ooh, I love your glasses, or I love your, oh, you've got such a beautiful smile, whatever. I just tell people all the time. My boys are so used to it now that they don't even get embarrassed anymore, because it's just what mom does. And I think what we often don't think about is A, to stop to say things, and B, what a huge difference it makes to people when you do that. I'm sure that both of you, Kerry and Andrea, you both have moments that you can think of where somebody said something to you that left a really big impression and made a huge difference. And I'm not really sure if that person actually knows what a difference it made to you. So if anybody listening to this thinks, oh yeah, that was beautiful, go and tell them. And if they're not around anymore, write it on a piece of paper, write it in your journal, make a beautiful meme about it, tell the world about them. It doesn't matter. That's a beautiful way of remembering them. But we don't do that often enough. And that's what my dad taught me. And the most beautiful part is, you know, how they often say daughters marry their dads, you know, they find somebody who's so similar.
Mhm.
Rob and my dad had never had the chance to meet, you know, but they were so similar. I just couldn't believe it. My mom used to compare every boyfriend of mine when I was growing up. It's like, oh, he's such a, and I hated when she did that. I don't use the word hate very often, but I really hated it. And I told her one day, I was like, hey, stop comparing all my boyfriends to my dad, blah, blah, blah. And then I met Rob, and I was like, far out. He's so like my dad. Just, you know, the way they played the guitar and the way they looked at life, and everybody loved him. And, you know, it was just, yeah. But that's where I got it from, I believe.
That's awesome. And so one of the things I watched this great special that Morgan Freeman did recently on the universe, and he talks about energy and all of the energy that is in our current universe, including the Milky Way and on the planet, was created in one fell swoop during the Big Bang. That's where all the energy, so energy, there's no new energy being created, and energy never dies. It only transforms. We are 99.999% energy. Our cells are moving at such a rate of speed that we feel solid. And so the energy of those that we love is just moved to into another form, whatever that may be. And so if there are things that you have yet to say, I empower you to say them, and you can say them out loud. I am aware of speaking to my grandmothers and hearing them respond to me. And just even with her, when I was doing something and I had my grandmother's seam ripper, I was making curtains and I was doing something. She goes, I just hear, use it like this. I was like, oh, that really works. It is around us when we will remember that we can call on love and listen. We've imagined, we were just thinking that it's actually the voice of love returning our call.
Yeah, I truly believe that. And it's often when we actually tune in that we do hear it. All of us, we all have the ability, and not everybody actually uses it, which is a shame, you know, because it's there for us to tap into. And I just had to think of something when you shared that about Morgan Freeman. There's this amazing, amazing book, and I'm sure people would know what I'm talking about here, which is by Anita Mujani, Dying to Be Me. I don't know if any of you read it, but she actually describes the moment when she passes over and meets her dad, who had passed 10 years prior, and meets one of her closest friends who had passed 3 years prior. And she describes how she experiences the other side. And her dad says, what are you doing here? It's not your time yet. And she didn't want to go back because her body was cancer ridden and she was in so much pain. And the doctors had called her family in because she was dying. And all her organs started shutting down. You know, there was no way out of this anymore from a medical point of view. But someone up there said, it's not your time yet. Her dad actually appeared for her and said, it's not your time yet. And anyway, cut a long story short, she did come back to tell the story and describes, you know, how it felt being on the other side. And it just gives me goosebumps. And to me, that is such a beautiful way. And I often recommend that book to people who don't know what to do with all of this. And it's like, read this. It will give you such a beautiful understanding of what's actually happening, and that we are just surrounded by peace and love. It's up to us if we tap into it or not. You know, that's incredible.
Yes. Okay, so people can find you on Facebook in your group, because you have a group, Life After Loss. And then you offer retreats as well, I understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's on
Yes.
LinkedIn.
So I think the easiest would be to just go to my website because you find everything there. The website is mariealessi.com, and you find the way into the Facebook group, Loving Life After Loss. You'll find me on Instagram on Loving Life After Loss. You'll find me on LinkedIn under Marie Alessi. So the branding is
Perfect.
very straightforward. It's either Marie Alessi or it's Loving Life After Loss, and you can literally find us all over the place. But on the website, you'll find links to the group, to the TEDx talk, to our interview if you allow me to share it. So it's just really
Yes.
like whatever you need, you'll find it there. And you can actually reach out to me and just connect with me, have a conversation with me. You know, there is the contact page where you can just fill it out, choose a time, jump on camera with me.
Yes. Awesome. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that I did. And one of Marie's great things is she says you start with a blank canvas. I just that whole blank canvas that you came up with.
Yeah.
When I heard that, I could so relate to that. It's
Yeah.
starting again and starting with a blank canvas to begin to be whoever, however you decide to have life. And that's what
Yeah.
when we were speaking about, Gabby Bernstein says, like, in a holy instant. And we're like, in a holy instant, you can change everything and you can begin again. And the whole
Yeah.
slate is clean and you are a blank canvas. It's our choice. We can
Yeah.
shift anything. We don't, that sitting in stuff and sitting in that is not required of us. We be with it as long as we require being with it. And then when we decide to make a change, we can make it. And I love the blank canvas.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a great analogy, and I love to color. So I can just imagine something really fun on a blank canvas. It sounds very
Yeah,
fun.
I really love it because I like that canvas behind me here. It's actually I got that from one of my clients, and she came to our very first retreat, so she's been with me pretty much almost from the get-go, from Loving Life After Loss, and she gave that to me after the retreat. She said, "I want you to have something to remember this. Was such an incredible transformation and life-changing for me." She said, "I'm not saying that lightheartedly. I don't know where I would be without you." That was so beautiful. So I had to hang it right behind me in my office to constantly be reminded of that moment. I just love our retreats. I just really can't wait. We've got the next one coming up in April, by the way, if anybody's in Australia. I just needed to throw that in there.
Awesome.
We love our retreats too.
Yeah.
It's a massive
so
upgrade for all
beautiful.
of us. It's a massive upgrade for the
Yeah.
people that are there. And then when you,
Yeah.
I just to know, but when we come home, all the upgrades start coming in. Like as soon as the door, I laugh because it's like as soon as the last person shuts the door, it's like download. It's like everything starts to come in and
Yeah.
all of our
Me
shifts
too.
and
It's so
we,
beautiful. Yeah. I feel very blessed to be where I'm at now.
yes. Thank you so much for
Lovely to
joining
see
us.
you.
Thank you
And
so
it
much
was,
for having me.
yes. And thank you all.
Thank
See.
you.